How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Sports Talk YouTube channel. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for week 2 game predictions. So on Thursday night, we ended up having the Green Bay Packers defeat the Washington Commanders by a score of 27-18. But yeah, now going into the rest of our game picks, as we do every single week, we pick both the team that we think is going to win, why we think that team's going to win, and we also pick the spread as well. But for our first game of the window, it is the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, where the Cincinnati Bengals are minus 3.5 point favorites.
Yeah, this is an easy game. Well, maybe it's not, but it was easy for me to pick. The Bengals didn't look good last week. They only beat the Browns because of a missed field goal by the Browns, and that's not a good sign, but I think they will bounce back this week against a Jags team that also is struggling to find their identity. I think the Bengals win this and they cover that spread.
Yeah, I think the Bengals. It's we talk about it every single year. The AFC North is a literal war division, and that is a division where any team can win any single game at any given moment. We saw the Browns beat teams last year in that division when they shouldn't have won games, and you see it when the Bengals are bad. You've seen it when the Ravens are bad. You've seen it when the Steelers really haven't been bad. Same thing with the Bengals, but you've seen the Steelers and Ravens lose games they shouldn't to, both the Browns and the Bengals and the Ravens and all this in between. And so I do think we we did see the Bengals play probably their worst game in the Joe Burrow era. And it was one of those things where you're just kind of watching this game going like, man, we know this Bengals team never starts out hot to begin with anyways. Like, they ended up losing last year to the Patriots in week number 1. So it often feels like Zach Taylor, who has often been on the hot seat these last couple of seasons, it's just one of those things where you just go, this, he just doesn't feel like he has his team prepared in week 1. However, on the Jag side, they beat the Panthers. The Panthers are not an organization that inspires a lot of pride and hope. Bryce Young didn't look good in that game. So for all of those reasons, I am choosing the Bengals to win this game. I'm also choosing them to cover that 3.5 point spread. I think the Browns, we talked about it. That defense is surprisingly good. However, I don't think the Jags have that level of defense. I think they have some D linemen that are very, very good. Not on the same level as the Browns. They don't have the same level of corners. And I think if this Bengals defense kind of shows what they were capable of last week against that Browns offense, they should probably be able to do similar things to that Jags. And so, yeah, that's why I have them winning and covering the spread. Next game up on our list is a divisional matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, where the Cowboys are minus 5.5 point underdogs.
Underdogs, really? The
Oh
Cowboys?
no, our favorites. My apologies.
Oh, okay.
Minus five and a
I
half.
was
Yeah.
gonna say that is a wild line, but I mean, the Cowboys should have won last week after that incident to start the game, Jalen Carter spitting on Dak Prescott. That should have been the motivation for a team like that to go out and win. You don't let somebody disrespect you and then lose, and the Cowboys did.
Yes.
Yet somehow the Giants had a more embarrassing outing as yet again in week 1 they did not score a touchdown. I believe that's the third straight year now that they have not got a touchdown in week 1. If they can't get a touchdown again this week, there's no chance they win, and I'm not entirely sure they can. We saw Malik Neighbors. He's already looking fed up with Russell Wilson. So we're going to see what happens there. But at this point, I got to take the Cowboys to win this. And if the Giants aren't scoring touchdowns, Cowboys are going to cover that spread.
Yeah. We looked at this team last week where it was, the Cowboys. They were able to get the running game going because Jalen Carter wasn't up the middle. The Giants do have a really, really amazing defensive line, but as long as the Cowboys can give Dak Prescott 2 seconds, he can find CeeDee Lamb if he can catch the ball. He can find George Pickens if he stops punching people and trying to rip people's helmets off. the Cowboys should be in full control of this game. Russell Wilson looked absolutely horrible last week in that game, to the point where there's people already talking about, is it Jackson Dart time, because Russell Wilson just looked that bad. And you know, you and I have talked about it, where we might even just go, we're going to put Russell Wilson at third string and bring Jameis Winston up to first, just to kind of get that little bit of a sense, just to give Jackson Dart a little bit more seasoning and sprinkling. But yeah, you can't score 8 points in a game and look that terrible against a Commanders defense that does not look good this year.
Mhm.
But yeah, for all of those reasons, I'm saying the Cowboys are going to win this game, and frankly, I do think they're going to cover that spread. The NFL is an offensive league. If you can't score points, you're not going to be successful, and you're likely going to lose games.
Yep.
Next game up on our list is my team's game, where the Chicago Bears go to Detroit to take on the Lions, where the Lions are minus 6.5 point favorites.
Yeah, both these teams looked bad last week. The Lions looked bad all throughout. They just could not compete with the Packers. And then the Bears, they struggled on offense. The only reason they had that lead was their defense, really kept them in it. And then letting a guy like JJ McCarthy run the table on you in the fourth quarter like that was, I think, a bit deflating and embarrassing for the Bears. Ben Johnson's a better coach. He'll have them bounce back, but I don't know. This was a hard one to pick because both teams just look so bad. It's hard to tell which one's going to bounce back better. So I went with the home team. I think in Detroit, I think Detroit's going to get the win here.
Yeah, when it came to this game last week, I was very dejected after that game because, the first drive of that game for the Bears, Caleb and the offense looked amazing. It was like, okay, yep, book the tickets for the Super Bowl, because here we come. Because not only did the offense look good, but the defense looked really, really good as well. They were getting pressured from the defensive line, which was, as we know, my biggest concern with this team. And they were able to cover the wide receivers that the Vikings had without Jalen Johnson, without Kyler Gordon in that lineup. And you're just kind of looking at that going like, man, like this is really, really good that two of our top corner and nickelback aren't out there on the defense. Don't forget not having TJ Edward out there. I'm going like, man, this defense is really, really good with three of their biggest components not on the field. However, Caleb lost that game for the Bears with his missed throws. I think Ben Johnson had a rookie head coach mistake in that challenge, but it is what it is. The Lions didn't look like they could get anything going on offense without Ben Johnson. So this was also a tough game for me to pick, but with the concerns I have for the Bears as opposed to the concerns that I have for the Lions, I ended up picking the Lions just because they deserve the benefit of the doubt that they will overcome a bad week as opposed to the Bears. But I will say I do think the Bears are going to cover that 6.5 point spread.
I do agree with that. I think the Bears will keep it close, but you're right. Caleb lost in that game last week. I mean, he had a wide open DJ Moore to seal that game and overthrew him.
Yeah, we'll watch the podcast this week,
Yeah.
and there's going to be a lot more reactions to that
Oh,
game
yeah.
from me. But yeah, next game is the LA Rams taking on the Tennessee Titans, where the Rams are minus 5.5 point favorites.
Yeah, this was an easy game to pick, honestly. Like the Rams, they're looking good, both sides of the ball, and the Titans are not. There was one play in particular I saw last week from those Titans where they ran a wide receiver screen and all three wide receivers went to block and not a single one of them looked at Cam Ward for the catch. It's like, oh man, this dude's gonna have a rough ride this year. Rams win this game. They cover that spread easily.
Yeah, I watching Cam Ward go up against arguably one of the top defenses in football in the Denver Broncos last week in Denver. That's a tough matchup. Like that's a hostile environment that you're going into, just facing that defense in Denver. It's tough, man. now going up against the Rams, that this is not an easy defense to go up against. So Cam Ward is really getting baptized by fire in this game. And man, like the Rams, they went up against the Texans, who do have what I consider probably the best defense in football right now. And if you don't agree with that, it's easy to say they have a top three defense in the NFL. If not, if you don't want to say top three, it's top five. Like they're there. And the Rams looked like they were able to relatively control the pace against that defense. But not only that, this Rams defense is really, really good, man. We talked about Jared Verse potentially being our defensive player of the year candidate. He looks like that, man. Like he's a guy that's capable. Yeah, I think this is an easy game for the Rams. I think they're going to kind of look at this and go, okay, we struggled a little bit against the Texans. We're going to get a little bit of a rebound this week against the Titans, kind of get our motor going. And I don't think this is going to be much of a competition here. Rams win and cover that spread. Now for what I am going to consider my toilet bowl game of the week, where we have the New England Patriots taking on the Miami Dolphins, where the Miami Dolphins are 1.5 point favorites. Or minus 1.5 point favorites, I should say.
Yeah, I'm surprised they're giving the favorites to the Dolphins with how bad they looked last week. And yeah, this is toilet bowl game A for me. I've got an A and a B, which B is coming up right after this, I believe.
Yes.
So, um, the Patriots, I expected to see some struggles from them. You know, young quarterback, not much for a receiving core, young running game, new head coach. But this Dolphins team, they just looked trash last week. They couldn't get anything done against Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts, the team that we picked to have that first overall pick next year. So for that reason, Dolphins are back in that boat of prove it before I pick you. I'm taking the Patriots to win this one and then obviously cover that spread.
Yeah, I was watching that Patriots Raiders game last week, mainly because I had a bunch of fantasy. Excuse me as I'm trying to sneeze. Oh, pardon me. But yeah, I was watching the Patriots and Raiders game last week because there was a lot of fantasy implications for me. And I picked the Raiders to win last week. I said, you know what? I think this Patriots team, their offense is really, really bad. Like Travion Henderson is probably the best weapon on that team. You have Hunter Henry, who is a fine tight end, but he's not going to move the needle. Then you have Stephon Diggs, who looked pretty bad last week, if he even played, because I don't even remember him on the field at some points, if he, again, even played in that game. However, the Patriots defense looked fairly decent going up against a Raiders offense that has a bunch of pieces. Now, they're a young defense that were missing a bunch of their corners, but they were still able to get 4 sacks on Geno Smith. Geno Smith is very similar to Tua in a lot of ways with mobility and stuff like that. Uh, Tua looked like the worst quarterback in the league last week. And that is simply just where I'm going. And similar to yourself, the Dolphins are going to need to be that team that proves to me that they can ultimately win some games before I start to pick them. Because losing to the Colts and making Daniel Jones look like Peyton Manning out there, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. They should be embarrassed. Wait for our power rankings to come out in the podcast. You'll know our opinions on this team. But yeah, I'm taking the Patriots to win and cover. Next game up on our list, where we have the San Francisco 49ers taking on the New Orleans Saints, where the 49ers are minus 3.5 point favorites.
Yeah, and this one was my toilet bowl game B simply because the 49ers are missing everybody except for Christian McCaffrey, which is bizarre to say. You know, last year it was CMC out. Now, week one, Kittle goes down, Purdy goes down. For it sounds like 2 to 5 weeks they're going to be without Purdy.
Yeah.
What's the Mac Jones show for the next few weeks? It's going to be rough. So nobody's really looking forward to Spencer Rattler against Mac Jones. I'm more dubbing this Alvin Kamara versus Christian McCaffrey. These two guys are either going to run up the score literally, or they're both going to get carted off the field because they're being asked to carry the ball 45 times. Um, it's not going to be a good game unless you like watching a lot of running and a lot of bad passes,
and a lot
um,
of punts.
and a lot of punts. I'm still going to take the 49ers to win, though. Um, the Saints just don't have anything that I see will benefit them. The only real connection they had outside of Alvin Kamara was Spencer Radler and what was it, Juwan Johnson? And that's because he throws it to him 16 times a game. So, of course, you're going to make some connections there. Other than that, he just keeps trying to get Chris Olave killed. It's not good in New Orleans. So yeah, 49ers win, 49ers cover that spread.
Yeah, I said the Saints are going to be my number one overall pick for this upcoming draft, just simply because this is the worst constructed team in football. When you talk about their offense, sure you have Alvin Kamara, but he's not young anymore. Sure you have Chris Olave, but he's closer to being Antonio Brown CTE edition than he is, to being the Chris Olave that we saw just 2 years ago. Their defense, basically you can just say what defense. Sure, the 49ers are missing some players. Their defense still looked pretty good against the Seahawks last week, and it doesn't sound like their defense is missing any players in that term. But yeah, it is going to be Mac Jones. You know for a fact that Kyle Shanahan is going to be targeting Christian McCaffrey a ton in this game, basically saying you're going to have to carry us to this win. But we did see Mac Jones last year when he played a game for the Jags actually look competent and looked more competent than we saw Trevor Lawrence at some points last year. So maybe we've seen Kyle Shanahan work magic with quarterbacks a ton before. But yeah, like this is a game where I just walk in and I go, there's no way in hell I see the Saints competing in this game just because they don't have anything. And so I think the 49ers win this game and they cover that spread. Next game up here on our list is the Buffalo Bills taking on the New York Jets, where the Bills are -6.5 point favorites.
Yeah, this surprisingly could be a fun game to watch. You know, the Bills had a dramatic come from behind win last week, and the Jets went punch for punch with the Steelers in a surprisingly high scoring game for both those teams as well. Um, Brees Hall seems to be the focal point of this Jets offense, as he should be. There were some good connections between Fields and Garrett Wilson, which I expect to see more of in the weeks to come. But the Bills, they're sticking to their guns with the next man up mentality, where it's nobody's going to get 15 targets, 10 catches a game, but you're all going to be involved. And it makes it tough for defenses to figure out who they need to cover. And for that reason, the Bills, I think, are just going to overwhelm the Jets. And I don't think the Jets are going to keep it as close with the Bills as they did the Steelers. The Bills are going to win this, and they're probably going to run away with it by the second half.
Yeah, I look at this game and go, I really wish this was like a week 4 matchup between these two teams because that way I could really get a sense of what the Jets are. Because last week against the Steelers, the Jets went up against that Steelers defense and looked really, really good. However, their defense also got torched by the Steelers offense. And it's one of those things where you just kind of go like I don't really know what to make of this Jets team. Bills, they're the favorite to win the Super Bowl at the moment. Like after getting that late win against the Ravens in what has been probably dubbed the best game we're going to see this year, and it's only in week 1, like it's going to be really hard to pick against the Buffalo Bills. However, I wouldn't be shocked to see the Jets win this game at this point,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm still picking the Bills to win this game. I feel like I'm gonna regret this, but I'm taking the Jets to cover that 6.5 point spread. Like,
No,
yeah,
I don't think you'll regret that. That was a tough choice for me. I just there was a lot more emotion involved for that Jets team last week. And Justin
yes,
Fields spent an entire season practicing against that Steelers defense. And so
yes,
I think that played a part into how they were able to keep it so close. I don't know if we see that again this week.
yeah. It was an interesting game. Next up on our list is the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Seattle Seahawks, where the Steelers are -3.5 point favorites.
Yeah, first home game for Aaron Rodgers in a Steelers jersey. I think he's gonna have fun. Um, Missing pieces for both of these teams on the defensive side of the ball. No Joey Porter Jr., no Deshaun Elliott for the Steelers, no Devin Witherspoon for the Seahawks. That is a big one. So nobody to shut down DK Metcalf. I think we saw last week Sauce Gardner had him pretty much on lockdown, and we didn't see a whole lot out of DK. A couple of bad drops. I think we see that connection between Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf grow this week as this is the DK Metcalf revenge game, much like last week was the Aaron Rodgers revenge game. I think the Steelers defense, they better have been working this week because you can't be giving up that many yards. Brees Hall is a phenomenal running back. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are not on the same level as him. You cannot be giving up that many run yards. They signed Jabril Peppers to fill in that Deshaun Elliott gap, and that dude is a huge, hard-hitting tackler. He personifies Pittsburgh Steelers football, and so it's going to be interesting to see him out there and if he can help this run game close some of those gaps. I think the Steelers win this game. I think they cover that spread. I think we see a much more cohesive Steelers team this week.
Yeah, I will sit back and say like I was probably the most shocked person to see that Steelers offense do that. Um, then again, that game was just weird last week for both teams, where the Jets offense looked good. I think the Seahawks still have a good defense, but yeah, I think you touched a lot on these good points. Is that uh, I right now I'm going to pick the Steelers to win, mostly because Mike Tomlin I think is a better coach than Mike McDonald. It's the revenge game for DK Metcalf, so you know that Aaron Rodgers is going to try to be feeding him the ball again. First time for both of these two guys playing their first home game at Acrisure. And so it's going to be a big game for both of these guys. And a lot of the time, it's going to be a situation of can this team just continue to put up points like they did last week? If they struggled this week, it's maybe one of those things where you just look at it and go, I guess last week was maybe a little bit more of a flash in the pan type situation. But
Mhm.
I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the Steelers. Until they prove to me that that wasn't just a flash in the pan, I'm going to say that offense looks vastly improved. And it's weird to say that the defense has fallen off as bad as it has, but yeah, that defense is going to need to improve a lot more. Um, just taking a look at this, I am going to take the Steelers to win and cover that 3.5 point spread. Sure, Sam Darnold did kind of some of the things that he needed to do, but he wasn't able to do anything against that Rams defense. And the Steelers, theoretically speaking, just from past, they have a better defense than the Rams. So next game up on our list here is the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cleveland Browns in what should be a fairly interesting matchup where the Ravens are minus 11.5 point favorites.
Yeah, and that's not really that surprising. The Ravens lost a heartbreaker last week. They're going to be angry. We're going to see a couple of angry runs out of Derrick Henry this week. Um, the Browns, they had a chance to upset the Bengals in week 1 and missed a kick. Not a good look. But that's the Browns. That's what I expected out of them, and this is going to be some emotion in this game. It's Joe Flacco's first time playing in Baltimore, not as a Baltimore Raven. And so there will be some emotion there. I think as a result, we might see the Cleveland Browns hang around for a little while. It's the AFC North too, man. You know, difference is the Ravens, their O line is not nearly as bad as the Bengals. Their D line is not nearly as bad as the Bengals. And so I mean, Trey Hendrickson and who? I know Shamar Stewart looks like he could be something, but he's not there yet.
Yeah, but
Um,
the Ravens don't even have anyone on Trey Hendrickson's level or even close to that.
no, but I don't think the Browns have it. The Ravens are going to win this game. They're going to be mad, but it's the AFC North. It's rare we see blowouts in the AFC North. I think the Browns are going to keep it close enough to cover that spread.
Yeah, I think the Ravens are going to be coming into this game really, really fiery, really, really pissed off, and wanting to get to that next level type situation. Basically, just saying, we are not accepting what happened last week, and we cannot go 0-2 in the season,
Mm.
especially like there's just
Especially not to the Browns.
yeah, yeah. If they end up falling to the Browns, it's one of those things where it's like I still think the Ravens are going to be a playoff team. They're probably going to be in contention to win this division. But if you go 0-2, that makes it 1,000 times harder. And we just talked about a team in that division in the Steelers who might have figured some shit out. And if you go 0-2 while the Steelers go 2-0, and let's say the Bengals go 2-0, and you're tied and you're 0-2 to the Browns and they're 1-1, that's a long, long climb to get to the playoffs. And you're going to have to get more games of perfection as opposed to you can scrape by. But with that being said, I saw some good things out of the Browns defense last week. However, with that being said, I think that was more the Bengals offense probably having the worst game in the Joe Burrow era that they've ever had, more so than what the Browns defense was doing, if that makes sense. I'm saying the Ravens are going to win this game, and I actually think they are going to cover that spread. I know we don't necessarily see a ton of blowouts in the AFC North divisional games. I'm just looking at this man going, it just feels more likely that the Ravens are going to come out and saying, we're going to not only embarrass the Browns, but we're going to put them to sleep.
Yeah, I mean that's what the Browns are for in that division to slap them around for sure. And I don't think it's going to be close, but I think it's going to be a 10-point win, an 11-point win,
Fair.
which won't cover that 11.5 spread. That's the only reason I took the Browns on that spread.
It
I
is
think
really
it'll
hard
be like
to.
a 31-20 final, that sort of thing.
I just don't even think the Browns are going to be able to score that many points, but
I just because of Joe Flacco, I think they will. I think
fair.
it's that emotion of being back in Baltimore after so many years and winning a Super Bowl there.
Yeah. Moving forward to our next game now in the 2 o'clock window, where we have the Denver Broncos taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The Broncos are only minus 1.5 point favorites in this one.
Yeah, and I think that's only because of what Daniel Jones did last week, where people all of a sudden are like, "Oh, you leave the Giants and you become a football player." Apparently, um, I think that might have been an outlier. That Dolphins team is bad. You remember a few weeks ago, and I picked the Dolphins to possibly even finish fourth in their division, and so I don't put a lot of stock in what the Colts did last week. Jonathan Taylor could have himself a good year. He looked good last week. And being at that high altitude, I think they're going to lean on him heavily because is it in Denver or is
I
it in Indy?
am. It is in Indianapolis.
Well, it's in Indianapolis, so that might not play as much of a part. But either way, this Broncos defense is one of the best compared to the Dolphins, which is one of the worst. And so I think the Broncos are going to give Daniel Jones a chin check, and they're going to knock him back down and go, whoa, whoa, you're still a bottom five quarterback in this league. And the Broncos are going to win this game and cover that spread because the Colts aren't going to keep it that close.
Yeah, watching that game where the Broncos were going up against the Titans last week, they kept that game way too close than it ever should have been. Just looking back at it, it was 20-12. And Bo Nix didn't look like he had a great game last week. He looked like he hit that sophomore slump hard. And it was one of those things where the Broncos allowed the Titans to stay in that game. They're going to need to be a lot better going up against the Colts because the Colts do have a better team than the Titans. The Titans are one of those teams that they got that first overall pick last year for a very, very good reason. They were that bad. The Colts, they have a better defense than the Titans. They have more offensive pieces on the offense. But with that being said, they also have Daniel Jones as their starting quarterback, and Daniel Jones is going to face one of the best defenses in football. And you put it best. It's going to be a chin check saying, listen, buddy, we know you had a really good week last week, but that's not who you are. We're showing the NFL who you are, and I think the Broncos win this one. And the fact that it's only -1.5 point spread, easy point spread victory, I think, to call that one. Next game up here is we have the Carolina Panthers going to the Cardinals, and where the Cardinals are favored by -1 or -6.5 points.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some good things out of the Cardinals last week. I said it earlier that I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a bit more of a breakout this year. We saw a bit more of a connection last week, and I think that's just going to continue to build. Panthers, they looked better than they have over the last 4 years. Over the last 4 years, they looked better, but they still look like a bottom three team. It's easy to look better when you were the worst team year over year. You were the second worst team last year. Now you're the third worst team, maybe. They're still not impressive. The Cardinals are going to make easy work of this, I think. I think they cover that spread as well.
Yeah, last week the Cardinals ended up losing. I think it was 26-10 against the Jaguars, and the Cardinals only beat the Saints 20-13. So it's not like the Saints or the Cardinals were all that great last week. This was kind of like my B candidate for toilet bowl game of the week because both of these teams aren't really that good. However, with that being said, the Panthers have one of the worst defenses in football. They did not look any sort of good last week. Cardinals have a better defense than what people are going to give them credit for. Jonathan Gannon, defensive-minded guy, he's going to have that defense playing well as long as Kyler Murray can find Marvin Harrison Jr. and continue to hand the ball off to James Conner. I think James Conner is going to have himself a pretty decent week. I think the Cardinals are going to win, and I'm a little bit worried about that point spread, but I do think the Cardinals are going to cover that 6.5. Moving over to our next game of this particular week and our final 2 o'clock window game. That is the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Kansas City Chiefs, where the Eagles are -1.5 point favorites.
Yeah, not that surprising to see a small spread there. The Eagles looked good last week, even without Jalen Carter. The Chiefs didn't look great. I know they didn't look great, but division game, Cowboys, Eagles. I'm not so worried about the Eagles. As long as Jalen Carter can control his saliva, then the Eagles are going to be fine here, I think. The Chiefs are kind of behind the eight ball, sitting in last place in their division right now and staring 0-2 in the face, going up against probably still the best constructed team in football in the Philadelphia Eagles. If all the Eagles are playing, the Chiefs are going to have a tough time. The Chiefs did avoid a long-term loss of Xavier Worthy, luckily. It sounds like it was only a minor dislocation of that shoulder running into Travis Kelce the way they did. Hopefully Travis can keep his head up and stop running over his own players, sacrificing guys to the black magic gods. I don't think they're going to have enough. I think we're seeing the fall of the empire begin in Kansas City. I still think they're going to be a strong team by the end of the year. I think they'll be right there in the final four for the AFC. But the season is starting rough for them, and it's going to start 0-2 because I think the Eagles win this game and cover that spread.
Yeah, I look at this and go, the Eagles' offense looked pretty damn good last week against the Cowboys last Thursday. The defense gave me some worries, man. Like, the Eagles' defense lost them that game, even though they didn't lose. But there was times where even the offense looked unprepared, and the Eagles just there was a lot of times where I'm looking at this going like, man, like the Eagles deserve to lose this, and it's coaching. Now, yes, losing Jalen Carter on before the first play of the game, before the first proper snap of football, you're looking at it going like, man, like this defense just like they're getting manhandled by Javonte Williams and then CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb single-handedly lost the Cowboys that game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the KC offense is a lot better than what we saw from the Cowboys, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Better quarterback, better running game, better weapons. Okay, maybe not better weapons, but there's still a lot of talent out there. A little worried about the receivers for KC, but you put it best. The Eagles are still probably the best constructed team in football right now. As long as Jalen Carter doesn't spit on Patrick Mahomes and get ejected and fined $56,000,
Hmm.
I think you still have to give the Eagles the favorite in this, but it's really hard to pick against Mahomes because we have never seen the Chiefs in the Mahomes era lose 3 games in a row. Going back to
Hmm.
the Super Bowl last year to now this week, if the Chiefs lose this game, that is the first time in Chiefs history since Mahomes has been the starting quarterback that they've lost 3 games in a row. That's a really, really tough thing to do, but I do think the Eagles are going to be the team that does that. And since it's such a low point spread, I'm going to get them to cover it.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game to watch, though. That's why they've got it in that late 2 o'clock window. I mean, it's going to be fun. See what Hollywood Brown, AJ Brown. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and plus AJ Brown should get more than 0 targets before going into the fourth quarter. I
I
know
hope
you
so.
are. I know you are really hoping for that.
Yeah.
Uh that's a conversation for the podcast that people are gonna have to listen to. Our Monday night football game of the week is the Atlanta
Right.
Falcons taking on the Minnesota Vikings, where the Vikings are minus 3.5 point favorites.
Yeah. Sunday Night Football probably not going to live up to what Sunday Night Football was last week. That was, as we discussed earlier, possibly the best game we're going to see this year until the AFC Championship when those two teams meet again. The Falcons somehow hung around with the Bucks last week. We didn't think that they were going to be able to do that. We thought that that was firmly the Bucks division to lose, and they almost dropped one to the Falcons. And the Vikings, I don't know what happened there. They took that game over in the fourth quarter and managed to come back and beat your Bears. This was a tough one to choose because who's going to be more consistent? Who's going to be able to carry that momentum? I know one lost, one won. I don't believe Drake London is playing this week for the Falcons. I'm not 100% sure. I know there were some issues there. Honestly, I'm going with the with the Vikings in this one just because of the emotion around that win that they had last week. I think they're going to be able to carry that over and likely be able to upset and beat the Falcons as well.
Yeah, I think the Vikings, that offense is is still a really, really good offense. I think the Falcons have a horrific defense, even with some of the additions that they added. I still don't think they're going to be that good. Um, Brian Flores is a sicko.
Yep.
He is a maniac. That defense is going to be still one of the toughest defenses to go up against every single week because Brian Flores is a fucking maniac. And while the Bears did a fairly good job with it last week, not allowing Brian Flores to completely, wreck their night, it's not like the Bears offense was elite either and kind of doing much. So it was a good test. I don't think this offense does that good against this Vikings defense. And I think it's going to be the Vikings defense just kind of controlling this game. JJ McCarthy is going to look better throughout the game, just kind of going along with it. And I think the Vikings are going to win pretty easily on Sunday Night Football. And I think they pretty easily cover that 3.5 point spread. Going over to our 2 Monday Night Football games of the week. Our first one is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Houston Texans in Texas, where the Texans are minus 2.5 point favorites.
Yeah, that was a wild pick for them to have the Texans be favorites. Like I know CJ Stroud was great in his rookie year. He looked pretty good last week as well, but that O line in front of him is doing him no favors. And I'm going to pick against the Texans most games this year because of that offensive line. This is an offensive league. You have to be able to score points. To do that, you have to keep your quarterback protected. They can't do that. And the Bucks, they almost let one slip to the Falcons, but we saw some great things. Emeka Egbuka coming out and looking like he could be the star of the future for that team, which is good because Mike Evans didn't quite get it done last week. I think we see that change this week. We see Mike Evans get the end zone this week. And Baker Mayfield, he stays calm, he stays cool, he stays collected. He's going to take over this game and the Bucks are going to win this one.
Yeah, I think I know you know how much of a fan I am of Baker Mayfield, and I think this is going to be a situation of where you're seeing a team that isn't perfect in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up, and they know they're not perfect, going up against a team in the Texans who has an elite defense, but they looked at their quarterback who got sacked the second most in football last year and said, downgrade? Downgrade. We can do a downgrade here, guys. We're gonna upgrade our weapons and receivers massively, but everyone's cool with the downgrade. Yeah, downgrade. Cool. Um, but yeah, I think this is gonna be a really close game. It's gonna be a lot of. I think it's gonna be a fairly low scoring game between these two teams, just because that Texans defense is really good.
Yep.
And I just think the Buccaneers have just good enough pieces on that defense to kind of slow down CJ Stroud. So I am going to choose the Buccaneers to win this game. But I think the Texans are actually going to cover that -2.5 points. Or actually, they have to lose that because,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but if it was the Bucks that were favored this way, I would say the Texans would ultimately cover that spread, just because I think it's probably going to be one of those 1 to 2 point games.
Yeah, it's going to be a field goal game for sure.
Yeah. But going over to our final game of this week, where it is the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders, where the Chargers are -3.5 point favorites.
Yeah. Justin Herbert, division game, gets to continue his journey towards the MVP this year, I think. He survived Brazil, and that's what I said last week. I was like, if he can make it out of Brazil without a lower body injury, back injury, then Herbert's going to run away this season. And I think we see it really begin this week because outside of Max Crosby, that Raiders defense, it's okay. It's not elite. And I think Herbert is going to tear it up. You got Lad McConkey, you got Keenan Allen. Omari and Hampton didn't have a great week last week. I think we see that change this week. The Chargers going to win this game, and they're going to cover that spread. It's going to be a bit of a blowout, I think.
Yeah, we saw the Raiders last week go up against the Patriots, and there was a moment like the first half of that game where I was watching that Raiders defense and going, man, this is bad. I remember texting my old man going like, remember how you said the Raiders are going to have a top 10 defense? They might have a bottom 5, making Drake May look like Tom Brady out there. Like it looks bad. Sure, they got 4 sacks, but the only offensive lineman that gives me any hope is Will Campbell, and Will Campbell ended up giving up 2 sacks in that game, man. So, our rookie left tackle in his first game going up against Matt Crosby, well, he's gonna have to go up against Joe Alt this week, and Joe Alt looked like the best offensive tackle in football last week.
Mm-hmm.
Chargers looked unstoppable. Quentin Johnson looked like an elite wide receiver. I don't think that is going to continue to go down that particular path. But with that being said, I think the Raiders have a really suspect secondary. Lad
Mm-hmm.
McConkey did exactly what he needed to do. You saw, again, Keenan Allen looked like primetime Keenan Allen out there as well. I just think this. I said it. I picked the Chargers to win their division when we still have the Chiefs getting the benefit of the doubt. That's how confident I am in this Chargers team. I don't think it's going to be close. I think the Chargers blow out the Raiders, and it's not going to be much of a competition. And that is going to do it for week 2 game predictions, guys. Thank you all very much for stopping by. Make sure to tune in for the podcast coming out on Monday. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan saying peace.